The National Assembly on Tuesday voted to amend the Constitution, and some of the clauses, voted for by the two chambers include autonomy for state assemblies and judiciaries, stopping joint accounts between states and local governments, appointment of minister for FCT, independent candidacy, and the power of the National Assembly to summon the president on issues of National Assembly. Now, the lawmakers in the same vein rejected the immunity for legislators, more seats for women, life pension for officers of National Assembly, as well as diaspora voting. Now, we'll look at this from the legal and civil society perspectives. And we have joining us here in the studio Mr. Ezenwa Nwagu, Chairman, Partners for Electoral Reforms and convener Say No Campaign Nigeria. Good morning and welcome to Daybreak.
Good morning. I'm not sure there is Mr. in the name that you have. Just say Ezenwa.
Okay, Ezenwa Nwagu. All right, we also have, joining us, he will actually also give us his take on the Electoral Act recently signed into the bill by President. And he's also joined on the show by lawyer Sam Kagbo. Good morning and welcome.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
It's nice to have you join us on the program. I think I'm going to start with Barrister Sam. Could you comment, on the new Electoral Act signed by the President?
Yes, I will, because that is one of the most auspicious things, if that language is right, that this government, to my mind, has done politically. And which is to say, it's one of the best things that it has done to help its history. The most important aspect of the Electoral Act that I think people should pay attention to and should monitor carefully and ensure that INEC drives it very well is the issue of the instant collation and transmission of the results. If that is well managed and executed very well, definitely the incidences of rigging would be minimized. I have said this over and over, election is about legitimacy. If the elections do not produce legitimate candidates, obviously you won't have a legitimate government. And if the elections are not the recruiters of the personnel of government, you won't have a responsible government. Much of what we see in the form of the lackadaisical attitude and disrespect that public officers or elected public officers have towards the citizenry is because they do not believe that the vote would take them out at the end of the day. Most of them, they just believe that what matters at the end of the day is their ability to maneuver the voting process. Now that we have the opportunity to curb that, we should ensure that the umpire drives through that very process. If we have that, much of even the litigations that come after the elections would be minimized because the results by themselves, like the word in the street, they will speak for themselves.
Okay, now let's move on to Ezenwa. Let's have your take from the CSO's perspective, the civil society perspective.
I really don't know if there is a civil society perspective. What I think is that the trust that we have seen in terms of the expansion of the democratic space by the passing of that bill is one that we can interrogate and then begin to, as Nigerians, as different stakeholders, begin to engage in strong advocacy. And that is what I've constantly said. There is so much praise all over the place. There is excitement, there is optimism. But if you have observed the electoral environment for a while, you will find out that when we introduce the smart card reader, we were all over the place saying that's a game changer. It would bring, enhance electoral integrity. So my sense is that law by itself does not bring reform. The attitude of the people, the attitude of the different stakeholders will be very important. We have seen about 10 very significant innovations in this new bill, ranging from financial autonomy to INEC by way of giving them their resources 1 year, the funds they need 1 year to the election. What that is meant to cure is the perennial logistic challenges that we have always had, so that INEC can prepare on time. It is possible to have money and yet not prepare on time. So what we then need is, like my colleague here said, is to begin to see about implementation. Let's leave where we are. The act, we now have an act, but we know that the bigger challenge for us as a country is not really the absence of law, is the much more the determination and the commitment of the actors to bring these laws to work for public good. And that's the focus of, if you like, civil society organizations. Where are we taking this to? This song about now that we have love, what are we going to do with it? We now have an electoral act that promises significantly to help the electoral environment. But like I keep saying, if we amend the laws, let us also amend the mindset of the actors. And by that, I mean the politicians, their political parties, and, generally the stakeholders. So it's time now to say we have a law that says if you make a call by duress, the INEC can review, okay? So people shooting themselves to power becomes criminalized, unlike what you have in the past, where people would get power through any means and then say, let's go to court, let's go there and sort it out. Now, INEC can review results that are made under duress. The beautiful thing about preparation for political parties, 180 days, for them to prepare, unlike what you had earlier. So generally, these improvements are important, but if the actors do not have the commitment and the will to drive the change that these things have brought on us, we may not get the outcome that we're looking for.
Okay. Now, civil society organizations, clamored for the president to actually sign this bill. Would you say, the protests, staged by civil society organizations also helped prompt the president to actually sign it?
Well, I think that there's a place for civic engagement. There's a place for citizen oversight. And that is the part that's where we activated as civil society. We don't want this. We under the Constitution, we are protected to protest peacefully and bring to fore. I think that when that protest happened, we had the presidency issue a statement and say this will be signed. So it's a huge response. But all that teaches us is that as citizens, we don't have to be laid back. If we don't want anything, we already have a platform, guaranteed platform. And I always say that it's not about civil society. It should be a Nigerian citizen thing. It should be more about us feeling, because sometimes we have this funny thing about, you civil society people. You have not, as if there is, and the person telling you civil society people don't even understand that he or she is also a member of civil society, may not be a member of civil society organization and groups, but you are in civil society once you are not acting in government. So the point is that as Nigerians, we are beginning to learn that it is possible for us to engage government, not from an adversarial point of view, but from a point of view of wanting to improve you know, what has been done. Because at every point in time, it's about us. It's about getting it better. It's about having the kind of leadership. Because the leadership recruitment process that the political parties, that the actors, you know, the president is a politician. He also has to defend his stuff. So in defending that stuff, there has to be a push from those of us who receive what they give us. And so civil society, the media, the general Nigerian people collectively wanted a better electoral law that guarantees integrity, that inspires confidence in the citizenry. And we should not just let that be for electoral law. We should engage government at every point in which we want certain change, certain things done right. And that's important. The 2 years of struggling through, the protest was a culmination. If you remember, we had already gone to the National Assembly for the public hearing. We have written letters. We also challenged the National Assembly when there were cross-referencing errors, if you remember, and all the other issues. And they reacted quickly as well by cleaning up that law and then sending it back to the president. We didn't want the president to take another 30 days because it has consequence. As you can see, INEC had to change the day for the election because that signing came a little bit late, but with nothing really fundamentally has changed. But it's important that we continue to engage and get results that we want.
Now, let's move on to the constitutional amendment. Let me talk to Barrister. What's your thoughts on the approval of financial autonomy for state legislators and judiciary?
To me, that proposal, because at this point it's still in the form of a proposal, it's very, very important. But let me even just digress a bit before I would answer the question. Funnily, for all the rounds of constitution amendments, the gest and efforts to give autonomy to the state houses of assembly and the local government have always been stuck by the state houses of assembly themselves. Because the moment the bills are passed at the National Assembly and taken to the state houses of assembly, you now have the governors influencing them to obstruct that. And this is, if you ask me, in one word, this is where we're also going to end. The governors will not allow that. But why is that important? Why should we have autonomy? Autonomy in the sense that why should we give them the strength and the teeth to bite? Because the only way you can get effective governance at the state level is if the state houses of assembly are effective. Effective in the sense that they oversee the governor and ensure that the governor acts within the ambit of the powers given to him or her by the Constitution. But what you now have is that the governors appropriate the states and act as emperors, and at the end of the day, governance is lacking at the state level. I have had to say this over and over. Much of the crisis we have and much of the problem of development that we have is because we don't have effective governance at the state level. What we have there, we just have people who, the moment they get into office, they become the lords of those areas. They appropriate the state entirely and become the state. And what you have is that the people themselves now have to remove themselves, their thought and attention from the state to the center, believing that if they put pressure on the center would in itself put pressure on the state for the state to be effective. But that in itself is not the way that the Constitution contemplates it. The Constitution had envisaged that the state would act autonomously, the entire system, which includes the local government councils, the state houses of assembly, the judiciary of the state would act independent of the federation and act in a sense that will make governance at that level not just effective, but developmental and purposeful. But we don't have that. The governors have appropriated the judiciary, they've appropriated the state houses of assembly, they've appropriated the local government councils. So instead of having these organs of government acting independently and effectively, you have one man. I'm not even tended to use the word the governor. You have one man who gets into the office and becomes the state. Every other organ and authority of the state he puts into his pockets and acts like he's at large. I am hopeful that this time around, for their own life and for their own respect and for their own history, they would pass this through. I'm just hopeful. But I won't be surprised if at the end of the day, that doesn't pass through. Ironically, they would not have the liver, they would not have the guts, and the political will to push that through because the governors would not allow that.
People, have argued that governors, act as emperors. So are you saying that governors hold too much power, to see this push through?
They do. And the reason is because they hold the finances of the states. The mistake that the Constitution did is the creation of that joint account for the state and the local government. Instead of appropriating directly to the local government councils, the Constitution says that the monies belonging to the state local government councils should be jointly managed by the governor and the local government councils. And because of this, the governors just sit on that money. And because much of the politicians that we have who go into political offices, their economy is entirely dependent on their offices, they subjugate themselves to the governor and don't really put out themselves to ensure that this be the buffer that they are supposed to be, because the state houses of assembly are actually the representative of the people within the state as regards the government of the state. The governors are not representing the people. And that is why the people cannot recall them. The people who can discipline the governors are the members of the state houses of assemblies. Those are the people who have the power to impeach the governors, who have the power to ensure that the governor does not act outside the laws, and who have the power to ensure that the governor act only as regards to an already passed law. You cannot act as large. But what we now have is that the governors, some of them, like you have a state where up to this moment, you don't have a state house of assembly, and nobody is saying a word about it. No state house of assembly. Then you now ask yourself, if you don't have a state house of assembly, how do you access money? How do you appropriate money? But yet, nobody is saying a word about it, and the citizens themselves, just like my colleague said, they believe that there are people out there who should do that job for them, but no. It is the civic culture, and that is the participation of the people in governance, in ensuring that every authority of the state and every personnel who is acting for and behalf of the state works and performs his duty in accordance with the law. And therefore, they are required to give a 24-hour surveillance on the activities of these public officers. So much so that if you see that your local government councillor is not working it is your place to ensure that he does not have the rest of mind. You push him to ensure that he works. And when you give him that pressure, he himself will in turn put the pressure on the local government chairman. And if collectively the councillors make sure that life is impossible for the local government chairman until he does what the people expect him to do, that local government chairman would ensure that the governors would not just come and re-roll their decisions on them, because they know that that would effectively throw them out of the office. Because what? There are people out there who don't make life easy for them. And when the governors have this pressure, they would work. And of course, if the governors are themselves under pressure to ensure that things are done in their state in the manner that the Constitution envisages, they themselves would on their own also put pressure. Because this is what the Constitution envisages when it creates these layers of public authorities, so that you have a push from here that pushes this right down to the center.
Right.
But this time around, what we have, everything is in shambles, everything is in chaos, and what we now do as individuals, instead of working collectively to shape and mold these people in our own image and likeness, what do? We keep putting pressure at the wrong places. Somebody's back house is besieged of insecurity. Instead of putting pressure on the local government council there to ensure that they themselves secure their lives there, they come to the center.
Okay. Now let's get other perspectives. I'm going to digress a little bit. So, Ezinwa, the National Assembly, also rejected slots, for women. And according to information, I hear now some group of women are planning to protest, at the National Assembly. As a civil society organization, what does this actually portray?
Well, first, I think democracy has to be about inclusion. And the work for me always is about ensuring that this space is not constricted. There are cultural barriers, religious barriers that education has to, help us deal with. A lot of mobilization needs to go into the work around women issues, around people, vulnerable groups, people living with disabilities. Even to sign the disability bill, there had to be a protest. Okay, so you have people who have gotten into the system. Rather than expanding the space, they work every day to shrink it. And you have a citizenry that is also beginning to worship those who are in power, rather than challenge them to do what is right. So almost all the bills that had to do with women were rejected, incidentally. So what that tells me, and what I'm telling my friends and my colleagues, is that when they're not too young, not too to run bill was being pushed, the organization around it was massive and huge. If you went to if you are in Borno, for instance, you will have noticed that about 2,000 young people went to their State House of Assembly in the midst of crisis to give a letter that they wanted that bill passed. So I think that democracy is not a walk in the park. It is a marathon. If we lose today, we re-strategize, we come back and keep pushing until this space is opened up. That's what I'm thinking. And we talked about, you were talking about the local government thing, but we need to pay attention to how people emerge. The political party, internal party democracy, and who controls the party, who controls the administration and structure of those political parties. You have a situation in which chief executives from the federal to the state have ambushed party structures, have appropriated it, in the words of Barrister. They have appropriated those party structures to the point where in the dominant political parties, they buy the forms. When there is an expression of interest form, they go and buy up the forms. And if you want to contest, they are the ones who give you.
Wow.
They give, not contest. So when we eliminated contests and we are now giving, we gave him the ticket. If there is no contest, if there is no competition, you cannot stand your ground. Because I bought the ticket for you, I put you there, I gave you the money to contest. How do you challenge me? The chairman of the political parties in the states, whether opposition or position political parties, 90% of the time you meet them in government houses. Every function of the government is introducing the party chairman. When President Obasanjo decided to be holding party meetings in the villa and appropriated the position of leader of the party to himself, it cascaded down to the states. The governors now started calling themselves the leader of the party. Their wives started to be the leaders of the women. Okay, so the chairman of local government became leader and ambushed and threw away every party official who were elected to perform the functions of leadership recruitment, through which we can now begin to make this. So if we want to deal with that challenge, we first need to take away this control. And one way to do that is to have true political parties where people pay dues, where party members are true stakeholders in that political party. What do I mean by that? You are organizing a congress of a political party. You say you are a member of that political party. Somebody pays your transport to the venue of the congress. Somebody gives you, if it is not in your base, if it's like now there is a political party that is going to have convention this March. Everybody coming, somebody is paying your way to Abuja. Even the clothes you are going to wear in Abuja, somebody has provided it. In what way are you a stakeholder? So you have a dysfunctional political party system that does not allow for the kind of independence and autonomy that we expect those who they produce to give us. So that's fundamentally where you need to pay attention, and we are not paying that attention. So somebody is in the state of assembly. He is there by virtue and mercy of these czars, these emperors that we talk about. The party chairman is paid salary by the czar. The state party office is paid, the rent of it is paid by the emperor. This controls makes it difficult for the kind of expectations that we're having. So what do we need? Now that the National Assembly is has put this out, we need to put the pressure. It's now a citizen thing. Anything we want as a people, we will get if we work hard, if we are interested in it. See, perhaps a lot of people think that the civic space is shrinking, there is no power and all of that. But there are fundamental things that have happened in our country that gives us the sense that we can push. When the president nominated Mrs. Loretta Onochie, every right, civil society, the media, everybody rose in. They backtracked. They went back. When the president is dilly-dallying on signing, giving assent, immediately the pressure came, not from civil, from everybody. When he saw that night, hey, we started talking about give us a legacy. These governors can be called out. They can be named and shamed. We can put them in a position where we begin to see that they are the debilitating factor for local government, state, and judiciary autonomy. So when they control the judiciary, and I was happy he called it organs. They are called organs of government, which means they have life of their own. They don't get life from you. They have their own life. So these organs need to breathe, need to stand on their own. And the governors working to make sure that those organs don't function equitably, the people can come in the stead. Now, the challenge is broader than we even talk about. I can ask any of us that is sitting here now. We come from local governments, okay? do we know that our local governments have budgets? Year in, year out, they throw out. When we talk about the federal budget, and he made that he correctly made that this thing. When there is a federal budget, everybody says, when they release budget, things will get better. We pay. But we don't pay attention to the guy who has responsibility to pave our roads, clean our environment, and then collect taxes. We don't pay. He collect those taxes. Nobody educated people. When there is a local government election, all around this country, all around this country, 99% of the local government elections have been taken by the dominant political parties in those states. They won't even concede one councillor. Educated people live there. They don't complain in the elections that are conducted in the states. So we have a lot of work to do.
Okay, ma'am.
Let me direct this to Sam, this is about, court, virtual court proceedings. There were differences in opinions by the reps, and the Senate with regards to court proceedings. Could you talk to us as a legal practitioner about this?
Yeah, we don't have a choice. We would have to go there because that's where the world is going. The idea of converging in one place to espouse our grievances, it's becoming outdated, and I believe so. And I was excited that during the COVID, at the height of the COVID, we had to resort to that, and it was effective. I think the mistake that people are actually falling into when considering the making of the Constitution, they think that the Constitution is about now. No. The Constitution is always meant to predate an era. The Constitution is always meant to produce a new era. Even governments, the Constitution is meant to predate the new government. So when you say we are not there yet, you're missing the point. You create a situation for we to be there. That is what the Constitution is meant to do. What is virtual hearing? And let me give you an example. For an example, I have to be in court today, but because of exigencies of the day, I may not have the chance to go there. If there is a law, an opportunity for me to call through by Zoom and speak with the judge or registrar to say, hey, look at where I am. By virtue of this place where I am, I may not be able to come to court, or I may not be able to come to court on time. So please stand down this matter for me. If we have that as part of the law, it could be done. It's all part of the hearing we are talking about. The hearing is not just about hearing of the case proper, but there are so many interlocutory, intermediary, mediary applications that are very innocuous that you don't necessarily have to go to court to do that. If we have that system, because it's happening all over the place. I was in LA and a classmate of mine came to pick me, and the route to the court was blocked because they were building a new passage through, I think they were doing a breakaway from an accident place. And therefore, we had to take about 15 minutes to meander through that place. All he could do was to call the court, and they just said, yes, you are 15 minutes away from here. I'm going to stand down your matter for 15 minutes. And we got there. The moment we got into the court, he said, yes, Mr. Wambuso, you are in court. I'll give you 5 minutes to prepare, and I'll get back to you. And that very particular day, he conducted a hearing. The witness was in Hong Kong. Virtual hearing. He led the witness in chief, and the witness was cross-examined in Hong Kong. He didn't have to fly into America for that day. But here, somebody will fly from America and come, the court will not sit, or may not sit. Somebody would come all the way from Sokoto for a matter here, the court would not sit. But if we have this opportunity of using modern technology, because that is the world we are today, we cannot hide away from it.
Let's come back to Ezenwa. Now, over the years, there's been a lot of clamor for diaspora voting, and even most Nigerians in diaspora have actually been looking forward to, exercising their rights. And now we're seeing that lawmakers have rejected, diaspora voting. Where does that take Nigeria? Does it take us back?
I've continued to make the point that every arena is a theater of struggle. Some of the gains that we have today, even independence, the colonial masters didn't want to give us independence. It had to be struggled for. Right from 1908, the Sokoto Baccalaureate revolt, down to 1945, down to 1961, students' protest, the coal miners, cola protest, all of those protests were all working to the independence that we eventually got in 1960. There's a sense in which there is a hurry, but the National Assembly needs to appreciate the fact that most of the time the challenge is we are not yet there. But it's important to realize that you can bring us there, and then we begin to talk about the mechanics of running diaspora voting. But we can take away the legislative constitutional bottlenecks that makes for constitutional, and then begin to put the mechanics into place. I know there are huge challenges. Go to Sudan, for instance. Over 5 million Nigerians in Sudan. Many of them undocumented. If you open that floodgate without all of this, so that fear, we are always outsourcing our fears rather than confronting it. So I believe that we will have to get to the point where we must embrace the fact that our citizens who don't live here can use technology to be part of this process. And the one way to do that is to take away the legislative bottlenecks, bring in electronic voting. We may not, INEC can say we have diaspora voting, but we cannot implement it now.
But are we ready for e-voting? Since,
there is nowhere where you have full e-voting. I've observed elections in several jurisdictions. I do know that where you can vote electronically, you vote electronically. Where you can vote manually, you vote manually. There is nowhere where a country has surrendered completely is to technology. It's not. So, like I said, it's about the fear of the challenges. We don't like to confront challenges. You understand? Some of the things we are testing out now, we are transmitting, we in Ondo, in most of the by-elections, we are transmitting results from the polling units electronically. In 2007, you could not conceive that will happen. But the push, that continuous push for incremental progress is what has gotten us where we are. The politicians are afraid. Incidentally, some of the tragedy of the reforms that we seek is that the place we go to for reforms is the domain of politicians who hold to their side all the time. So, Mr. Kago talked about the fact that people are thinking of lawmaking for today. You understand? There is no thinking that this law should precede me. So, what have we done? Every year, there's an industry, there's a constitutional amendment industry in Nigeria. So we have left that out now. When the next legislative year comes, we will start another constitutional amendment. And there's a vote for it. We need to also look at the political economy of this constitutional amendment and see whether the outcomes that we get match. So some of these things, they're deliberate. You leave them so that when the next this thing comes, they will deal with it. But we can deal with those things because we can't be doing constitutional amendment every legislative year. We put the deputy senate president, the deputy speaker, and then the committee, and then they start jumping all around the country. They are collecting, So we must do something about this industry, this constitutional electoral amendment industry, and take a holistic, whole hog view, and then give time for the ones that we have altered to mature, to take shape. So everybody that is coming to the National Assembly is waiting to amend the Constitution. And I think that is where I have a challenge. I have a problem with it.
All right.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the program this morning. We've been speaking with Ezenwa Nwagwu and Sam Karbo, who is a legal practitioner. We hope to have you next time on the program.